Welcome to the Level Up podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer, a show that features conversations with the Trailblazers, thought leaders, risk takers, decision makers, celebrities, athletes, and investors who are defining the gaming and eSports space. On Level Up, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and esports a global phenomenon. As we do in every episode, we'd like to thank The Ultimate Gamer as the visionary and catalyst behind Level Up. The Ultimate Gamer is an esports and gaming, entertainment, technology, culture, and lifestyle organization with the intention of discovering the best gamer in the world. Connecting and celebrating gamers and gaming is at the core of The Ultimate Gamer's mission. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game and connector to the esports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Ryan Johnson, founder of Cxmmunity, a nonprofit committed to increasing participation in minority esports through Steam development. He's also an advisor for Brickhouse Ventures, an early-stage venture firm that focuses primarily on esports, sports technology, music, film, and production. Ryan and I met a few years back at a DreamHack event in Atlanta. At the time, he was just breaking into the industry. But in less than 2 years, I've watched him become a true force in the space with a mission, intelligence, and drive to evoke real change. From the moment he told me about his inspiration for the X in Cxmmunity, I knew he was setting me up for an education regarding his vision and mission. From grassroots initiatives in underserved communities, more than 9 million kids have no access to laptops and Wi-Fi, to making history and changing the world, he reeled off data points and quoted reputable industry sources that started me down his path to a better future. It's hard not to be impressed with Mr. Ryan Johnson, and by implementing his own system of dual tasking, he's quickly achieving much more than I think even he imagined. So set down your remote for a few minutes and join me now as Ryan drops some knowledge on our gaming universe. So you probably know where I'm going with this, right? But you founded a company, and I don't want to say it. I'm going to let you say it because I'm not even sure I say it right. But my point was, when I was growing up, like, you learn how to spell and everything. You know, you spend a lot of time in vocabulary and spelling and grammar and all those kind of things. And I think gaming and just the technology industry as a whole has kind of changed a lot of that, right? Like spelling now, you see like the word refresh. There's a company called Refresh, right? And there's just no vowels in it. It's R-S-H. So how did you come up with, is it Cxmmunity? Is that how you say it? Okay. Yeah, so how did you come up with Cxmmunity? And I mean, let people know how you spell Cxmmunity.
Yeah, so we spell Cxmmunity Cxmmunity. So we basically just swapped out the O for the X. And primarily the reason is when you look at some of the, I'll say, for lack of better words, the challenges within the gaming industry of why you have such disparities is that a lot of your professional esports are played on high-powered gaming PCs, right? So you start to ask yourself, how do you expect minorities, people of color, people that come from lesser means to then ever get to the professional level if, you know, that end goal trajectory ends up on a PC? So the reason we use X is most minorities actually play games on console, primarily being PlayStation and then Xbox. And so X is the only button that's consistent across every console, and then of course a keyboard.
Oh, wow, man. That's fascinating. I had no idea. That's pretty cool.
It's a Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, of course, then a PC, all have that similar button. So for us, it's just the way of kind of bringing in that entire ecosystem of gaming to make it inclusive for everybody.
What was the moment, man? Like, who came up with that? Were you guys just sitting around talking and somebody said it and it just came up? Or were you like actually trying to think of like a different way to spell Cxmmunity, or how did that happen?
I have a for-profit company that's called Nexus. So I was thinking about just like synonym words to connecting. And so it was like community, like frame, like just going through all these different names. I was like, Cxmmunity with an X could be kind of cool. And then I had to like double check and make sure I was right about the notion that X was on every system. I was like, that's it. Because at the time I had no co-founders or anything. So I just kind of thought about the name. I was like literally laying in my bed one day.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I mean, I kind of want to keep going in this direction. We'll go back to your origin story, like how you kind of got into gaming and everything, but just talk to us a little bit about Cxmmunity, because you said you have a for-profit and non-for-profit. What's Cxmmunity? What's your mission and your goal with Cxmmunity, and who are your partners? What are you guys doing right now?
Yeah, so like I guess foundationally, the mission of Cxmmunity is to increase participation of minorities within the esports and video game industry. And we do that by partnering with underserved schools and then also historically Black colleges and universities, and exposing the faculty, professors, and then also students to professions within gaming, right? So what you have is that you have a lot of minorities that love to play video games, but not a lot of people know that you actually can work within gaming as a career path. Like I grew up very middle class, right? I didn't know esports was a career path until I moved to Atlanta. I mean, until I got into it roughly 2 years ago, right? So it's not even about the means of education. It's just like literally access, opportunity, exposure. And so that's kind of like the foundational purpose of why we created the organization. So before shelter in place, what we were doing is going into, again, like K through 12 institutions and actually meeting with the principals and athletic director of the schools and understanding like where they were in their esports journey, right? You know, a lot of these schools have students that wanted to participate. They have very bright students that are studying like STEM and like just do a whole bunch of like science-based projects and design thinking within the schools. But the challenge is that the schools couldn't afford the 6 to 10 gaming PCs, or 6 to 12, I should say, gaming PCs necessary to then actually spin up a program. So for us, we're like, okay, well, if the barrier of entry that's preventing all of these thousands of students then from being a part of this industry is just, let's just call it $1 million. How can we put together a program to raise awareness or raise funding to then actually help these schools get outfitted to then have esports teams? Yeah. So then, of course, shelter in place happened. So that was no longer possible because all of our schools and students are now home. And so then COVID really exposed the fact that a lot of the schools that we worked with, their students didn't have access to laptops or Wi-Fi when they went at home, correct? Right. And so at scale, it's funny, I was looking at some data. And so at scale, what you have is roughly 9 million kids throughout the country that don't have access to laptops or Wi-Fi. And there's only about 1.5 million people that have been impacted by COVID. So when you look at some of the data, a lot of people wouldn't argue, but I would argue that the education pandemic is a little bit greater right now than the health pandemic. Just when you talk about recovery and response, and then also effort, time, and funding going towards the latter, right? I don't know what the economic impact is when 9 million kids don't move on to the next grade level, or when 9 million kids then have to go back to a grade level to then overwhelm already overwhelmed teachers. Right. So I don't think a lot of people are looking at that type of data just yet, but I think it'll be here sooner than later. So
yeah, man, I mean, it's outstanding. It's a pretty heavy lift, what you're talking about, and just finding out those numbers, right? That's part of the research, going back and learning 9 million kids, like you said, are affected on a daily basis. I mean, they don't have any access.
Right. And that's right. That's pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID. So it just kind of like brought this to light, for lack of better words. And so then I took it a step further. And I was actually reading the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And so Article 26 actually states that every individual should have access to a free education, just plain and simple. And so for the first time in history,
well, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? What does a free education mean?
Right. So a public school education, right? Or a public university. So at least it says from an elementary and secondary and not necessarily postgraduate. It's kind of like literally how it's laid out. Well, then if school still being free, even in the public school scenario, is now shifting from physical to virtual for the first time ever, right? It's never happened before. You have not only 9 million kids that don't have access to technology, but you also have 9 million kids that are in violation of, or their human rights are in violation. By not being able to have the opportunity to get a free education. So a lot of this conversation has actually started to build upon itself to the point where, like I said, literally in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to be teeing up a conversation between senior executives of a very large hedge fund and some technology partners that we're working with to figure out the type of funding that we actually can get. Because when we brought in the fact of now the human rights conversation, which is a very real conversation, like you kind of elevated the playing field from, hey, we need a couple $1,000s for tech to, okay, federal government, what are you doing to address this problem at scale? Department of Education, and like, what do you guys, like, actually, what are you doing right now? Right. because what I've learned is that recovery and response for COVID has happened in phases. The first phase was food insecurity, like making sure that families had food. The second phase kind of migrating from food to housing. And then they say the third or like final or one of the final phases will be around actually like education and making sure that the digital divide is not being met and managed. Right. So that's kind of like we're starting in phase 3 or phase 4, depending on what scale you're looking at. Right. So really for us, Tech for COVID is a platform to bring together corporate partners, influencers to raise money and awareness for the fact of everything that I just shared with you.
And Tech for COVID is something that you're working on right now through Cxmmunity.
Correct. So Tech for COVID is a collective partnership between Cxmmunity and a nonprofit called HBCU Heroes. Yep. So we started building it about 7 weeks ago. We had our first event now 3 weeks ago, and we're going to be running this episodic series throughout the remainder of the month of May, just to continue spreading awareness and raising funding for this. So in our first 3 weeks so far, we've been able to raise a little over $118,000. And also Intel has donated 100 devices to our program, which equates to about a 40 to 45K in-kind sponsorship as well. Okay. So in the last 3 weeks, like I said, not to be repetitive, but we've raised, if you count the in-kind, about 145, 150K. And we've delivered so far a little over 100 devices to about 5 schools right now throughout the country.
And so there's a number of questions, right, man? You're doing so much. There's a number of things. One thing I want to let you know, you're very similar to me, and my wife's like this too. You talk a lot with your hands. You're very demonstrative.
Yeah, like I have to.
No, so that's good, but I want you to let you know, but your microphone, like on your headset.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I think once in a while you kind of, and so it kind of makes a little bit of noise. Like,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Like the little feet. I got you.
Yeah. So keep being demonstrative and talk, but just keep them out here. Right.
Okay. No. Yeah. Just don't. I'm too close.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
No.
Really,
so what I was going to ask. First of all, selecting schools. Selecting your partners. That's got to be a challenge. I'm assuming a lot of it's through relationships that you already have, meaning the high schools, right? The people that you're reaching out to and providing all this equipment to, and then the subsidizing these programs. I know that Georgia, and you've got some relationships, I think, on the state side, right? Georgia supports eSports and supports the gaming industry. So is that an area that you guys are reaching out to as well? And then, this 3-part question, I know it's pretty big, but then as far as the historically Black colleges and universities go, who have you already partnered with? And is it really close to home where you are in Atlanta, or you said it's national already? Yeah.
So starting at the HBCU side, so several of the schools that have already received devices from us include Grambling State University, Johnson C. Smith University, and then Clark Atlanta University as well.
And did I read, I don't mean to interrupt, Ryan, but did I just read that Johnson C. Smith was the first college to actually have an eSports? I don't know, it's a varsity program or if it's just a recreational program?
So it's neither. It's actually curriculum. Okay. So Johnson C. Smith is the first HBCU to have an eSports minor management course taught within their business school. And so one of our board members, John Cash, actually helped. So I assisted, and John really pushed that whole agenda forward as far as getting that curriculum developed and implemented at JCSU, which is like awesome. Like it's history making, and John did that during Black History Month. So like he carved out his own piece of history within Black History Month. So I think that's pretty dope. Yeah, So then also going to far as like the schools, well, as I go back to like the state funding, I would love to have conversations. I have not gotten to that point where we've talked to like state officials as far as funding. We do have some relationships with the city of Atlanta, because specifically Fulton County and Atlanta public school system, they've had a very, very strong push behind esports and gaming over the last couple of months. Well, I should say over the last couple of years probably. And so that now just more recently, they're doing more within their power to actually activate that. Because going back to where I started is that all of the surrounding counties outside of Atlanta public school system are active within esports, right? So schools north of the city, and like basically every school district north of the city has gaming for the most part. And so then when you look at the core product of Atlanta, that's where the disparity begins to happen.
Okay.
And so that's where we're starting to have some conversations with certain city officials and council members around what do we need to do, where can we find funding or identify funding to then help these schools be a part of this industry. Because it's pretty funny, right? You could say that minority kids in Atlanta, right? But minority kids within esports in Atlanta are still the majority than other kids throughout the country whose state haven't regulated esports.
Okay.
So like even our minorities are still in a majority capacity. In some, if you like, again, I have like a lot of weird perspectives, but like that is another one where, we just need to then again, just find funding means to then allow these kids to get to have the same opportunity.
Right. And you're going to try to do that, I mean, for all of these schools at once, or is it going to be a piloted program? You're going to phase it in? I mean, it's a lot of schools, right? A lot of kids.
Well, in reality, it's like 20 schools. And I mean, a varsity program is going to have anywhere from, let's call it 10 to maybe 15 kids. So it's really not as much as you may think. And then from a previous life, I came from IT consulting, and like exactly what I did, it was like purchasing and implementing technology. So like making an order of like 300 devices is very small scale to compare to like what I used to do. Mm-hmm. So it is overhaul. I mean, like literally about $1.5 million to cover all the schools for up to like 2 or 3 years because we've already done the math. Okay. And so like now it's just about having conversations with companies like Coca-Cola and Home Depot and Mercedes-Benz and State Farm to get them to understand the value. So for us, we try and identify non-endemic, well now endemic partners like a State Farm or Mercedes-Benz or a Coke that are already in the space because that conversation is a lot easier.
Sure. Yeah, you don't have to re-educate them.
Exactly.
Right.
Because Coke has probably made one of the largest investments, into the industry, being like one of the prime sponsors of the Overwatch League. Right. You know what I mean? So there's a ton of just conversations that need to be going on.
So specifically the access that we're talking about, originally you were talking about 9 million kids that didn't have access to laptops at home, right? Correct. And internet at home. This program is in line with that, separate from that, or because this, from what you're saying, from what I understand anyway, is that this is really about the programs in the schools. So bringing 20 gaming systems or PCs into the school. So are they two separate? Are they hand in hand? Am I understanding it correctly?
Both. Okay. It's both. It's just that one happened before the other, and then COVID happened. So then we had to go back to ground zero. You see what I mean? So like community was us getting devices into the schools, and ground zero is now us realizing that kids need devices at home to then bring to the school.
And is that tech for COVID?
Correct. Yes.
And will that stay tech for COVID after we kind of get through this, or would you think you'll rebrand and move on in another direction?
No, it would definitely be a rebrand, but the same mission. Right. But it's like we plan to do this throughout the entire duration. But again, mind you, it's just that when we started, a lot of the data I shared with you in the beginning, I didn't even know. At first, it was us just like wanting to get kids devices. I didn't know the scale. I just knew they're like, hey, Ryan, 75 of my kids don't have devices. Can you help? And I was like, okay, I wasn't set up to do that, but let me look into it.
Right.
And then as it progressed and we learned more and we brought on more partners, like, yo, this is actually a really kind of like big undertaking.
Well, and I love that you just said partners. So I'm looking right now, and I went onto your LinkedIn page, and I just scrolled around and reviewing some of the things that you post. And one of the things is Tech for COVID. One of your partners, and I'm not sure, but it's a picture of Michael Strahan. And by the way, the tag for this is great. Bridge the gap, and he's got the smile with the gap between his teeth. I think it's fantastic. Right?
Yeah. So a lot of people, whether I spoke to them directly or not, we have a ton of supporters around us that have a lot of relationships. Like, I wish I personally knew Michael Strahan. I don't, but he's down to support because Strahan is a HBCU graduate. So now everyone knows what he's done professionally, but a lot of people don't know his origin. And so for him, he knows the struggle of being an HBCU student athlete. When you come home from a game and there's no food, or you get out of practice and then all the cafeterias are closed because they operate within finite hours. Right. So for us, it's about identifying people, and we don't like to segregate it like this, but it just kind of, it's the ugly truth, right? For us, in order to really get our message, we had to align originally with people of color that understood the value of what we were doing, because it's really hard to convince, affluent individuals that can never even wrap their heads around that type of predicament to get their support, right? It's a lot easier for them to give money towards frontline workers to get face masks because that seems, it just seems more palatable.
Right.
But it's like, how am I going to, like, kids without laptops? Oh, that must be fake. everyone has a laptop. Everyone has access to Wi-Fi. So it's a lot hard. It's a lot different of an audience that we had to go after originally.
Sure, because they don't have that similar experience. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and again, just staying on community, then we'll shift gears a little bit, but talking about community right now, when you wake up in the morning, I'm sure your days are full. It's super exciting, right? It's very dynamic. You had to shift gears and pivot a little bit, obviously, as we hit the pandemic. What is your typical day looking like right now? I mean, are you doing what we're doing right now? Are you just basically on the phone and on Zoom calls all day long? When do you have an opportunity to be strategic and where this is like this hour I'm going to spend trying to raise money for our program and this hour. So do you have a structure like that, or is it kind of just all thrown at you at once?
So I like to say structure, but I realize my structure is not structured to anyone else. So like for me, it's literally on the phone from like maybe like 8 to 7 every day, or Zoom calls, like legit since we started this about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And it's a combination of talking to labels and influencer management companies. It's a combination of talking to corporate sponsors. It's a combination of talking to partners like Twitch or the NFL or United Way to figure out like how their powerhouses, because like I'm fully transparent, right? We're a new nonprofit. We've been around since February. So a lot of what we're doing, you've
already raised $150,000, which is pretty amazing.
And so one of the things that I literally have to deal with is people not believing that what I'm telling them is true.
Right.
We get questioned a lot for like our integrity or how we're doing what we're doing. Like, there's no way that you did that within 5 weeks.
Right.
So that's like a challenge within its own right. But every day it's just talking to people like you, because at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, cool. This is a podcast, but off the podcast, like I know what you're into. I know what you do. So I'm like, all right, well, at the end of the day, this is still a biz dev play, right? Because we're sharing our story. We're able to share our messaging and like what we're trying to do. So this is all I do, man. And at night I break for like 90 minutes and then I get back on my computer and then I close out my day every day by playing Call of Duty Warzone with my younger cousins.
Right.
We play that from like 11 to 12:30 or 1. And then I just repeat like literally every day for like the last 5 weeks.
So that's kind of the way you detox and relax and just clear your mind.
Yeah. So that's another thing. People are like, well, how do you know this so well? Is like, I actually play video games. You know what I mean? Like it's a pastime for me. It's a passion. So now just getting to be able to build programs around what we're already naturally doing is pretty cool.
Have you seen, like you talked about some of the pushback? That was actually going to be my next question. What's some of your pushback? And it's just people really believing in what you're saying and that you have integrity in what you're doing. And there's a number of programs that have been out there. I mean, I remember when we first started doing the Ultimate Gamer in January 2019, and we were putting on that contest, that competition. Fire Festival had just come out, and like everybody had talking, everybody had seen Fire Festival, and so everybody's like, "There's no way this guy's for real. Who's Steve Suarez? Who is the Ultimate Gamer? How's this actually being funded?" Yeah. It was a challenge. But aside from that pushback, one of the things I have found, and I think you have too, but I'd like you to talk about it a little bit, is educating. So 2017, 2018, we met at DreamHack, the education process. Have you found that you're still educating people, but people are more open to that conversation now about what is gaming, what is esports, is this real? And are there people actually reaching out to you now that maybe 2-3 years ago weren't even like thinking about the space?
Well, it's actually, it's pretty funny. So there's a lot of people that over the time I've been kind of like grinding since I moved to Atlanta. I've reached out to like 10, 15 times, like no response. I can't even make it up. Like, hey man, just checking in. Can we get on the phone? No response. Then we post tech for COVID, and now like several people are like, hey, can we jump on a call? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it's kind of funny to see how like things are shifting a little bit.
Right.
But so definitely deal with that. There's a lot more people. We actually got pulled into a couple of projects with some other larger nonprofits that are like, hey, can we potentially bring you all on from a consultative standpoint to just kind of help us to grow, develop, and kind of think through what a virtual fundraiser around gaming even is about. Because what I found is that a lot of things can happen. Like these things can happen 2 different ways. Basically, you could do an authentic live event, which is what we did our first time, and I was like, that was literally crazy. Like 20 hours of live content was crazy. Wow. And then a lot of these groups are doing like pre-recorded content. right? So a lot of your live streams, I hate to break it to you, none of them are live, right? Like literally maybe 80% of them are not live.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So they're filming the content and then they're posting it
As a live event, right?
Interesting. Wow. 80%, you think?
Dude,
it's a high number. It's a high number.
Let's just say if I've talked to 8 or 10 of these groups, that 7 to 8 of them are doing pre-recorded content.
Okay.
Because what I found is that people are trying to create spectacles, but in definition, what you're really trying to do is raise money, right? So we're kind of like stuck in between the two, because now we're starting to do a little bit more pre-recorded, but we're still doing a ton of live conversation at the same time. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, but it's interesting because my kids are really into Mr. Beast. I don't know if you've heard of Mr. Beast. Yeah, but he did a rock, paper, scissors fundraiser, and I think raised a ton of money. I don't know exactly how much it was, but it was rock, paper, scissors. I think it was like 2 or 3 hours, and I think it was actually live. But he's not used to doing things live, so some of it came off, a little awkward. Because
think about it, right? Because even your best influencer, your best actor, they're not in a live scenario. Everything that they do is very, all right, action, all right, cut. Like they operate within a finite time window.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like they're not prepared to talk or entertain for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a different perspective. And so that's why I'm having much more respect for like radio hosts. Because I'm like, dude, they're on the radio live every day for 4 or 5 hours, and they have to just create that content in real time.
Yeah.
Versus a content creator has time to pause, break, edit. Like there's none of that. And so when I look at a craft, I'm like, all right, that's why guys like Larry, I'm sure you know like Larry Ridley. So Larry is our host for Tech for COVID. Larry's phenomenal. Dude, like I've never seen someone be able on a live scenario just pick and cue so many people, get everyone engaged, this and that.
Right. That's a gift and a talent, right?
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about your partnerships then. How do you guys determine like who you're partnering with as far as when you say what you're doing and maybe another charity or a fundraising outlet out there that's trying to raise money, right? When you partner like that, do you raise money for both causes? Like how are you guys coming in? Or is that the consulting part?
So like it's two sides. So there's the consulting half where people would just bring us on literally to structure and project manage. And then there's also opportunity. So Britton, Reese, who's director of marketing for the NFL Alumni, super good friend. NFL Alumni had an initiative to raise money for computers, right? That was their standalone initiative. And then Brent's like, yo, we're doing the same thing. How do we then just come together to make our separated events just one large successful event?
Right.
So for us, right, there are groups that are kind of similarly focused. So like United Way is another one. They have a Tech Up initiative. And under Tech Up, they are mandating to get as many devices to between 500 and 1,000 students as they can, given this time period. So again, that's an easy no-brainer, because what we found out is that we don't have $1 billion. We don't have the name recognition as of yet, but we did create this platform. Right. And so these other groups can basically plug into this platform to kind of amplify their own messaging, which still falls under the umbrella of a Tech for COVID.
Okay. And what's a realistic number? If somebody came to you and said, listen, Ryan, we want to raise $100,000. We want to raise, do they come with a figure to you, or do they just say, hey, let's do this and let's figure out, and whether we raise $10 or $1 million, any dollar is going to be good. Like, how do they come to you? And then what do you say is a realistic number that they should try to reach through their fundraising efforts?
It's really hard because a lot of times we don't know that internal data. So like for us, right, it's a lot easier for me to establish a fundraising goal because I just mirror out the amount of students that we're trying to service and then the cost of the device per student.
Work back.
So I can literally do that math. But when you're talking about like cancer research, maybe there's a cost per patient number that you could then back into to say we want to help this many patients. It costs this much per patient. This is our goal, right? But outside of that, they usually will say something like, hey, look, we're trying to raise $30,000. What do you think would be the most cost effective and easiest way for us to get to that goal? And then we'll say, look, well, you should align with these partners, maybe reach out to this influencer, because what I will not do is basically guarantee these individuals that we can get them the same influencers that we got for us.
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not about empty promises. So I always say, we'll build a profile of influencers that you should go after, but we're not saying that we're going to get these people to commit to your cause.
Right. Now, is this part of community, or did we jump into something as on your for-profit side?
Dude, I don't even know anymore, man. It's like, so actually talking last night with some of our like business operation guys, and what we're thinking about doing is how do we want to structure it properly? What I'm probably going to do is have community be like that umbrella organization, and then just structure our marketing and branding arm to be an agency within the nonprofit. So that's what I'm thinking about, because again, a lot of people are asking us like, well, who are you hiring to do the branding and marketing and this, that, and there? I was like, well, outside of the partnership with like Access Replay, you know, we're doing the sponsorships, we're doing a lot of the influencer campaigns. And so it's really hard to answer those questions because of like two different companies, but I am still me. So it's like, I don't know how you segment those things outside of like pen and paper. But yeah, so something we're still working through. But everything we're talking about so far has been under the purview of community.
Okay. How many people are on the team total?
Day to day, including myself, 4. And we have a like advisory board of about 7.
Okay. All right. And then, so for the for-profit, obviously, when you look at the for-profit, you're looking at how you're monetizing everything. And the non-for-profit, you're looking actually how to raise money for, you know, these other causes. You need
absolutely.
You need to pay your employees, but that's why it's interesting to see right now this tug of war that you're going through, right?
Yeah, because like I'm brutally honest, as you probably like. I'm brutally honest, right? Yeah. So one of my biggest concerns, going back to what I said around like just the whole integrity play, like how are you doing what you're doing, is I already know that once we do some more work, we'll have like a target on our back. I'll be real, like we're all minorities helping more minorities. Like that's not the best look in North America, apparently, right? So for me, I never want to put myself or our team or partners or even students in a position whereas in like we're benefiting or profiting off of making community. You know what I mean? So like that's one of my biggest concerns, is that I was actually talking to a couple of mentors and I was like, damn, man, we could be in a position where we almost succeed too fast and then people begin asking questions.
Right.
And although I think that's unfair, it's just the world that we live in. And so that's like one of my main cautionary tales as we're building this thing out, is like all attention isn't good attention. And we don't necessarily want people assuming that we're just doing this to make a lot of money and then just profit off of that, when in fact, that's not really the case whatsoever.
Right. That's not what you started out for. But the fact that you're aware of that, is the awareness alone is important, right? Because you understand that you're under a microscope to a certain degree. You're also, anytime anybody's successful, people are going to be like, okay, well, why are they successful and why are we not? And a lot of times there's jealousy that comes along with that as well.
And then we don't want no part of it, honestly. Like I don't have time. Like I don't do any of that type of stuff. Like I'm not into it, whatever. So I was just like, I literally told my guy last night, I was like, look, whatever is going to keep us the cleanest on paper and in perception is what I want. That is the level I want to operate at.
Yeah. How did you find your mentors? That's one of the things that I always talk about too. It's like, how do you find your mentors, and how often do you lean on those people, and where do they come from?
If you want my honest answer, I'm gonna say God, because I didn't go look for them. They all just kind of appeared when needed. Right. So one of my mentors, for an example, is my former boss when I was working in IT. Another woman I met actually at that job, she was a client, and then she left and I left, and then she went to another organization. We just stayed in touch, and now she's on board. I mean, like literally every one of the people that are advisors or mentors I've just met over these last 5 years in different scenarios, and they either saw something in me or vice versa that said, we see value in extending this relationship forward. And so let's just continue talking. Yeah. And so it's kind of cool because a lot of the mentors I met maybe 2-3 years ago, they're like, Ryan, we knew you were up to something, but we didn't know what you were up to. Right. And they're like, we're just glad that we stayed engaged the whole time.
Yeah, that's really cool. You kind of jumped right into what you're doing now and didn't have any background on that. So, we're talking about mentors now. If you it's funny because I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, way back when, because esports and gaming, right? Esports is really young, right? It's still very immature. It's in its nascent stages. And so he was saying something about being way back when, which is 2017. And I was like, dude, that was 4 years ago. It's like, that's a blink of an eye. right? So you've done, since I've met you, you've done a tremendous amount just like in the last 2 years. But kind of talk, because you are endemic to the space, you are a gamer. Like, how did you first get involved? Because there are a lot of people that start listening to these podcasts and they want to figure out, how do I get involved? Whether they're coming in through, a college university program that has curriculum, or somebody that's in traditional sports, maybe looking to bridge and leap over into esports, or somebody that just is saying, wow, gaming and esports is actually a career opportunity for me now. How do I do it? So how did you start and to get to where you are now today?
I'm trying to think where to start. So after I graduated college, I was back home in Maryland. My first job was in IT. Like literally my first job was door knocking, like selling
which is hard work. Give me an idea of a timeline this for us.
May of 2015.
Okay.
So May 2015. Yeah, May 2015, literally right out of school, door knocking job, make your 40 dials, hit 20 doors, collect your business cards, enter it into CRM, monthly quota, like real trenches type.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 5-6 months when I was back home in Maryland. Vonage Business actually acquired that company in like September, October of 2015. And through that acquisition, they're like, Ryan, you can go to Philadelphia, you can go to Atlanta, or you can go to Houston, or you can get another job. And so I was like, oh, well, Atlanta seems kind of cool. Like at the time, the girl I was dating lived here. So I was like, it was a no-brainer. So I was like, look, I'll just go down to Atlanta. Cool. I was actually thinking about Houston, but mind you, if I went to Houston, I would have got caught in the hurricane. So I was actually really thankful I made the decision for Atlanta. Right. So when I got here, I stayed with Vonage for about a year. Again, a year of like literally just grit, man. Like suit and tie, summer, like down south summer, hitting doors. Yeah. I got tired of it, so I left. I found about this new opportunity at a company called Adapture, which is where I spent the next 2 years doing IT consulting. So I still was like in that tech space, but always on the sales and like biz dev side. Okay. Around the beginning of 2018, I started my graduate program at Georgia State in sports management. And so, knock on wood, I just finished the program last week, thankfully.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So at the same time, I was working at Adapture in tech full time. And then I was actually at night going to school to study like sports business at Georgia State. And so through that, I started thinking about like, how could we leverage technology and sports to like change the world? I just started having these conversations with myself. And so fast forward from January all the way to July, I was like literally broke as hell, bro. Like I had like $500, but I was like, well, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to NBA Summer League. I'm gonna meet somebody. I don't know who I'm gonna meet, but I'm gonna meet somebody. I ended up going out there and I met this gentleman named M. Cole Jones, who's the managing director of Brickhouse Ventures. And so this will probably start making more sense to you.
Yeah. Right? But I was gonna ask you, where does NBA Summer League take place?
Vegas. So that 2018 in Las Vegas.
Okay.
So I go out there like literally by myself, just like kind of lounging around the city, going to games. And I recognize M. Cole at the time. I know you know M. Cole from all the eSports Week stuff. So I recognize him from a couple of different panels that he did in Atlanta that I had just attended a couple months before. So I literally ran into him at the gym and I was like, hey, bro, you look familiar. Are you from Atlanta? He's like, oh yeah, I speak here and did this. And he's like, what are you doing out here? I kind of told him like what I was looking to do. He's like, when you get back to Atlanta, text me. So long story short, text him. I joined Brickhouse Ventures for the next year. Brickhouse Ventures invested in the Access Replay. Then we created eSports Week, and that's where I met you. And then we did eSports Week Dallas. And then fast forward to that, I left Brickhouse Ventures and worked at another agency for a little while called Revel Marketing. So I worked with Revel for about 6 or 7 months. And then I left Revel leading into February of this year. And then from February until now, it's been community. So like basically my background has been tech, then studied sports, and then brought sports and tech together. And I was like in eSports, which is like the same thing. And then kept it pushing ever since.
Right. And you see eSports and gaming as the vehicle to achieve a lot of these things, these dreams that you have.
Yeah. Cause I mean, I've always, between sports, music, and video games, those have been like my 3 pillars of like my personal life. Yeah. Like I grew up playing basketball, high school, played in college. Always been listening to music in all of those scenarios. And then in my free time when I wasn't playing basketball, I was playing video games.
Right.
So for me, it was like, if you were to ask me as a kid what I wanted to do, it would be like, I want to play basketball, I want to play video games. Like that would have legit been my answer. But that was a crazy answer. So I went to college for physical therapy. Right.
Right.
And so,
Are you still balling now?
well, not recently because of everything, but
Right.
before all this happened, yeah, I go like 3-4 times a week to like LA Fitness and just play ball. Yeah.
Okay. Open runs. I don't play at LA Fitness anymore because sometimes you get in there and there's 10 guys playing and one of the people doesn't know how to play and they'll take you out,
No, trust me.
Yeah.
I have a lot of cautionary tales about that too.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you kind of a great segue, man, because you talked about the difference between music, entertainment, sports, esports. And one of the questions that I find very fascinating and interesting right now is this metaverse, right? These things that are happening through the games themselves. So Fortnite being a great example, and the Travis Scott concert and the Marshmallow one before that. What are your thoughts? Is that an area that you think you guys will get into at all, or just it's a entertainment vehicle? Do you buy into what's going on through using, again, gaming and esports for music and entertainment and all these other areas?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think naturally it's going to happen, just because, as an example, we like the Tech for COVID platform has attracted some artists, right? So I don't think it's pretty low hanging fruit to then say, hey, Mr. Artist, all right, look what Travis Scott did with Fortnite. I would love to tee up a conversation between you and Activision. You know what I mean? So it will almost be like shame on us if we didn't ask those questions, because we have the purview to almost do it. But I think it's transcendent, because I've never seen video games as video game. I think a lot of people look at gaming as like literally like hardcore gaming. And for me, it's always been like community, because I grew up an only child. So like PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, that was so like solo story mode games. And then, Xbox and Halo comes out with Xbox Live, whatever. And like it literally, as an only child, it opened you up to community, right? You would then go home and you would not be by yourself. You would be with, and like I was telling someone the other day, like literally, bro, like people I was friends with on Xbox in like 9th and 10th grade, to this very day, we still talk to.
Right.
I
was going to say, I think that to me is one of the biggest challenges, right? In educating, certain group of people that are maybe a little bit older, maybe my demo, that don't understand gaming in that way, because gaming when I grew up was not a community. It wasn't a community driven, right? It was, you went in, you were solo and you were in the basement. And I keep saying when I started, it was a joystick with one red button. Like that's all it was, and then the internet came along, and then you had this ability, and it's amazing because I saw it with my kids, and I didn't even realize, until like 2 years ago, my son was playing Fortnite with 4 friends or 3 friends. It was he and they were playing in a squad, and I was like, "Who are you playing with?" And he said his buddy Caden, who lives in Rio Vista, which is like a mile away. His buddy Luke, who's in Victoria Park, which is again a mile away. And then he's like, and Amri, and I'm like, "No, Amri's in Israel right now." He's like, "So what?" I'm like, "Wait a second, you're playing with something." Like, to me, that was like it was crazy, because for me, like when I was growing up, to talk to somebody in Israel, to call somebody long distance like that was, first of all, cost you like $5 a minute. And, it's just crazy. And here he is on his Xbox, just like it's nothing. So it's amazing. When you talk about community, that's one of the things that with the Ultimate Gamer that we're talking about is really around that core idea of building community. So a good question, actually, based on what you said. There's a lot of different communities, right, in gaming. So you're playing Warzone, you said. So that's like a different community than you probably find playing Minecraft.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And do you think that they can all be brought together? When we talk about doing things like doing conferences, and when you see DreamHack, they kind of still break out, but you can all bring them under one roof or one umbrella.
Yeah, for sure. I think the purview, right, the lens at the end of the day is video games, right? So as long as you have video games segmented silos, I look at games just like you have movies, right? And music. There's different genres for different people. But at the same time, Coachella is one of the biggest festivals in the world. You know what I mean? And it caters to everybody. So I think absolutely I would love to do like community con, like I already started thinking about some stuff like that. But yeah, so what I say is that primarily because our focus is very hyper around minority students, primarily being like African-American and Hispanic, those demographics fall usually within the same genres, right? That's usually your Call of Duties, your Maddens, your Fortnites, NBA 2Ks, which is much different, to your point, than League of Legends and Smite and in like Minecraft, etc. So for us, just knowing that, it's like we use those as the tools to then actually get the kids engaged in school. So like we create like merit-based systems and then say like, hey, class, the top 30 performing kids this week or this month will get the opportunity to then go to Access Replay and then interact with Offset on a Friday. So like we try and gamify education to the best of our ability.
Right.
Because I guarantee you the kid don't care about grades, but he'll get the grade if it means he gets to meet a rapper.
Yeah. You've got to leverage it. I agree 100%, by the way.
And so that's kind of like our methodology, is just meeting the students where they are, not reinventing the wheel. It just so happens that within like the last 3, 4, 5 years, this is actually an acceptable opportunity now to bring this type of content into a school.
Right. When you're doing your outreach right now, I know a lot of it's around Georgia and Atlanta. Will you go into South Florida? For instance, if I introduce you guys to Dillard High School, which is one of the pilot programs down here in Broward County, I've spoken to those guys, and I think you would offer a tremendous amount of value to them, speaking to them about what you're doing with those schools. And then also for one of the questions that I got from them, by the way, first time I met with them, they had just started their eSports program in January. And they had like 5 kids. They had a president, and they were looking to open it up. They only have like, I think, 2 Nintendo Switches. That's all they have right now, right? But the next time I went in 3 weeks later, I brought a professor from Johnson & Wales University, and we went in to talk to him. And I thought we were going to talk to like 8 or 10 kids. There's like 55, 60 kids packed in the room. It's amazing, right? Yeah. It's amazing. So one of the questions that one of them asked me was, well, what do we do about sponsorship? How do we raise money for our program? And I'm like, well, what do you want? Exactly to what you said, kind of work backwards, right? Work backwards with that. So I think these schools are right, not just for the esports and gaming side of gamifying what we're talking about, but also building out their business plan, right? Building out their program in the schools. And they're the ones doing it with the leadership and guidance of people like yourself.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. Like you said, I don't know what type of demographics that school is, but I'm like, there's students in these schools that know that there's opportunities. They're frustrated because now they're going to school where they can't live out their passion that they know that they should be able to live out. And so they just need help building out the plan. And so that's kind of like where we come in. Like, I don't think we're anything more than advocates. Like, you know what I mean? People are like, yo, what do you do? I'm like, we just advocate for the people that want, that can't have.
Right.
Or want, that don't know how to get.
So looking ahead right now, so the next 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, I know we're going through what we're going through with the pandemic, and it's probably thrown a little bit of a wrench into some of your plans, but what's your calendar look like? What are some of the things that you're doing, that I can follow, that any listeners could follow? Because I know you guys are doing a ton right now.
Honestly, I think for us, we're just going to, because I can tell you this, I don't think Atlanta schools are going back next fall.
Okay.
Like, personally, I don't see how it's possible, man. It just literally makes no sense. And so we're just going to keep planning, and whether they do go back or not, to keep doing these more tech for COVID like programs, to just keep students engaged. Actually, something cool we did last week, we started these miniature graduations, right? So another thing people aren't really talking about is, imagine if you're a first generation 8th grade graduate and then now your graduation is canceled. I'm like, yo, that kind of sucks.
Right.
Same thing for 12th grade. Yeah. So we had about 6 kids on last week. We got them on a Zoom call. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Desi Banks. Desi Banks, he's like this really funny influencer off Instagram. He has like 5-6 million followers or whatever. Okay. But we had Desi Banks meet the kids on a Zoom call. They're like, yo, is that Desi Banks? So Desi Banks is like their commencement speaker. And then we gave those 6 kids like graduation gifts of free laptops like last night. And so like we're probably going to keep doing like programs like that. Because what we're finding is like we can keep sponsors engaged because we're meeting like some of their corporate social responsibility tactics right now. And then also a lot of the big popular word right now in the world apparently is diversity and inclusion. So everybody wants to be that. And it's actually really funny. I'll say this as like my mini tangent. That's like my mini anger tangent. Okay. It's really funny, especially I think like gaming specifically, right? And this is not pointing any fingers or calling out any names. But now everybody, once it seems that the industry is more established, right, wants to be diverse and inclusive. Right. So I think it's funny how I think America views the word of diversity and inclusion just wrong altogether, those terms, because that's not something you do retroactively. Right. It's something that you do in tandem as you're building that process, because I would ultimately argue that your definition of diversity isn't diversity at all. It's let me get established and then let me integrate those that couldn't be a part of it before. And foundationally, that's not what those two words mean.
Yeah, yeah.
So I get really frustrated a lot of times now when I hear some of the larger tournament organizations or like collegiate leagues talking about we want to be diverse, we want to do the HBCU tours. I'm like, why? They say, I'm like, why? Why do you want to do why do you want to do it now? And why didn't you do it 3 years ago?
Right.
And so for me, what I look at, and this is, again, not pointing fingers, just Ryan observing and living his life, is that people want to be diverse and inclusive when they realize that that brings a lot more eyeballs to their platform, right?
Self-serving.
It's a self-service version of diversity and inclusion, because you wouldn't need diversity and inclusion initiatives if you were diverse and inclusive to begin with.
Right.
So that it's almost like a protective thing for me, because it's like no one cared about these kids or these schools until there was money associated to those kids in those schools.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So for us, like, we're quickly just trying, or as quickly as possible, trying to aggregate as many supporters, especially with John being the creator of the first HBCU curriculum, to then say, like, how can we partner with other schools and then other underserved K-12 schools? Because if I'm a young Black kid in Atlanta, right, and I want to study esports and gaming, the way it's set up right now is that I can't go to a historically Black college because that college doesn't have the degree program of my choice. And so we're really looking to help. Again, we're not saying that every Black kid needs to go to HBCU. That's not the messaging whatsoever. But is that, like, for me, I'm a graduate of HBCU. That experience changed my life. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, if a kid wants to attend one, he should be able to also attend it and study what he wants to study. He shouldn't have to go to another school because that school didn't have the resources in place to keep them.
Right.
And so that's kind of like where we're spending our time.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, man. The journey that you're on and what you're doing right now is incredible. I think the difference that you're making, you know, in that community and in the world as a whole is amazing. And I think it's just, to me, it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? I think there's a lot more that's going to happen. I would like to talk, obviously offline, I'd like to talk about some of the stuff that we're doing through the Ultimate Gamer and just a bunch of different charities that we're working with, that some of the stuff you just told me about. I mean, I think it's just a matter of us kind of hammering through it, right? There's just so much opportunity out there. I have found that on the cause or the foundational side, the biggest challenge is actually doing something that has direct impact and is sustainable. So the stuff that I've done with some athletes down here was more like we created the entertaining side of gaming, but there really wasn't a very strong impact on the financial side. Like, we didn't know how to move the needle when it came to dollars for that foundation. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like maybe you guys have kind of started to create that secret sauce. You know, where if you do sit down and say, okay, we're trying to raise $50 or $100 or $250,000 for this cause, we need this amount of time, we need these kind of influencers, this needs to be our audience. The thing that I find so amazing about it, right, is that when you do, a lot of those athletes have their own foundations and they're raising money. A lot of times it's golf events, it's fishing tournaments, it's things like that, and it's a limited number of people that can go to those, right? You'll spend $500 to go golf with David Ortiz or Ray Lewis or one of these guys, right. But you can do what is it? Oh, you can auction off. You can have a silent auction. You can have auction items, so you can raise money that way. But it's always going to be finite. Whereas when you do gaming and streaming and in these online platforms, you have a global audience, right? Like, it's not limited.
So there's a lot of things I think we did not do well, like the first 2 weeks of this whole program. And it really was tapping into like the globalization of it. But again, right, the problem that we're trying to solve for is so niche to, not to say niche to North America, but it is such a American problem of like just pure systematic oppression. You know what I mean? So like, it is sometimes hard to get outside nations or influencers bought in.
Dude, by the way, I don't think that's an America only thing.
Well, yeah, I say it's definitely not like an American. But when I say the American thing from the perspective of historically Black colleges, right? That is an American thing. Right. Yeah, but I definitely know that oppression is a global problem. Right. But we're talking about the schooling perspective. Right. So for us, like, I think we had to do a better job of, like, we had some cool influencers like Strahan, right? The Strahan's audience is not the Twitch audience. So as an example, what we've done is, like, we've had way more conversations with the Aaron Ashleys of the world and like the Aerial Power and like more of your core endemic gamers, but also are still on the other side of the fence as well with their networks, because that's where we are going to be seeing like the most success. And then ultimately the corporate partners that we can get bought in as well.
I do think, and I think that's the main thing, right? I think it's is it Dr. Lupo that's raised a ton of money for like St. Jude's? Yeah. So when you have that center of influence from the gaming side, then you can bring in all the other entertainers and celebrities and athletes, but they're the ones that kind of have that audience, that 5 million, 10 million, so. Speaking
of that, I actually have to reach out to Loaded. Because it's crazy. I'll see it. I'm gonna see if I can pull this up and you can see it on the screen. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
So early this year, I went over when I was in Miami with the. Oh, sheesh, I'm going through the.
You came down for the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, I didn't even see you. I texted you. I didn't see you though. That was crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of events going on, man.
Dude, it was like overwhelming as heck. So when we were down there, check this out. Was able to get like a 5-minute conversation with Ninja.
5 minutes, man. That's a long time.
So like we're literally just talking about community and like some of the things that he's been doing and whatever. And so he did like, yo, whenever you need, reach out to my manager. Like, I'll definitely support you. But I haven't pulled that card yet, right? Because with me, I'm very like, I didn't want him to be the first. I didn't want him to be the second. But it's like, hey, look, this is what we've done. This is who we've had. Yeah. So I would love to go to someone, and a lot of it is still relationships I don't have. Like, I don't have a direct tie to their management organization. But I'm not stupid. I'm like, yo, if I got him, Dr. Lupo, boom, that's a wrap.
Yeah.
And then also, I'm not sure if he made it. He did come out to eSports Week Dallas, right?
Yep.
So for one of the panels was Reed, and Reed was the president, or he is the owner of Night Media, which has Mr. Beast. You know what I mean? So like, I know we have the ties, but it's just that I've been very. I like to move. I don't like to move slow. I like to move strategically. Yep. And so for us, it's like, I wanted to raise the awareness because I just don't think that we're at a point yet to be able to ask properly of their help. But now I know specifically how they could help us get to what we need to do.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's the timing part of it, right? That's having the right cause and the right time. I agree. We're doing the same thing with Ultimate Game right now. So I think there's, we talked about this before, and I think about it with a number of other people that we've run across. And your network and your community has grown vastly in the last 2 years, and it's through the hard work that you put out there and these conversations that you continue to have. But I definitely see us doing a number of things in the very near future.
Oh yeah, for sure. You're like one of the first people. So again, like, I met you that Friday at eSports Week, Atlanta in 2018. That was literally my first day in esports ever. Like that was a Friday morning, and I quit my job on that Thursday afternoon. No, I met you Thursday at the tour. The tour.
Right.
The tour. Yeah. So I literally quit my job and drove up to Alpharetta from Sandy Springs, and that was the start of all of this.
Yeah. By the way, that tour to me is one of the most powerful things that you can do as far as somebody that's coming into esports. That's great, and I've got to run in a minute too. And I'm, again, humbled and appreciate all your time. But could you just talk really quickly, kind of, because you did a lot of the groundwork, right? You're the one who put on a lot of that. And you actually were the tour guide or the tour director for that experience that we did on that day, both, I think, in Atlanta and in Dallas, right?
So I was less involved in Atlanta just because I was just getting onboarded. But a lot of Dallas, that was the programming that we put together.
Yeah.
But as far as just like structuring it, was that kind of like your question?
Yeah. That one day, because it's a 4-day conference, right? And it's around DreamHack. But what you guys do for eSports Week is you actually create a tour. You give us a day long where you take everybody around to these different locations in the city that's hosting, and you introduce and let people see everything that's going on in the city. So just give us a quick, like, how did Dallas work?
Yeah, so Dallas was cool. So
you paused. I lost you. Hold on.
Getting eSports.
Hold on. Can you still hear me, Ryan?
Yeah, I hear you. I'm here.
Hold on 1 second. I think I lost my connection. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. Yeah. So go ahead. Start again from Dallas, because I think what happened is I'm on Wi-Fi right now. I'm on my hotspot, and I got a call, and I think it paused this for a second. Yeah.
So super quick. So eSports Week, we educate business leaders possibilities within the esports industry. So essentially, we took Tommy from the esports stadium in Dallas. We then went over to Topgolf, which has integrated some esports lounge into their facilities. And then where did we go? We went to the Dallas Cowboys facility and we visited Complexity, their new headquarters. Then we went back to the hotels, and then we went to the Dallas Mavericks headquarters, their gaming center, for like a night recap event. So really, we built out these day-long experiences to educate people on the different elements around physical locations and then also digital activations within esports.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Did you enjoy putting that on? And I'm sure you got a lot of good connections from that as well.
Yeah, it was awesome, right? That was like my first event that I helped like coordinate within gaming. So it was just cool to reach out to like the Dallas Sports Commission, the Dallas Chamber of Commerce, to like get their local support, and then but friends like you, like, hey, look, man, if you can make it out, we're doing this thing again. So it was like one of the most fulfilling like experiences. And then like actually working it is like you're working in video games all day, man. Like, what's not to like?
Yeah. Will you continue to work with those guys?
Yeah, so I mean, Access Replay Allie, she's one of our advisors for community. Yep. M. Cole and I are still we're still close. Him and I hosted the first weekend of Tech for COVID together, out of Access Replay. So we're all still connected. But I guess again, right, it just depends on if DreamHack is going to continue doing DreamHack, as if they're going to keep doing eSports Week.
Well, I think we'll probably start seeing some more digital conferences as well. So maybe obviously you can't do the tours that way. You can do a virtual tour, but you can't be on property, if you will. So, all right, man. Anything else? Because obviously just a conversation. I don't know if I hit on things that you wanted to talk about. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you kind of want to hit?
Well, I'll say is for listeners, Tech4 COVID.live. We're actively raising money. The money in real time is being brought in, and we're buying devices. And like, as soon as we can buy a device, we get a device and we send it to the students. So again, Tech4 COVID.live. We will be live this Sunday from 3 to 7 p.m. We'll have some professional athletes. We'll have some more artists on there as well. Just talking about how they're supporting and combating coronavirus.
So 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep. Twitch.tv/Access Replay.
Say that one more time.
Twitch. So the channel on Twitch is Access Replay, AXIS Replay.
Okay. Perfect, man. And then in the show notes, I'll add a number of things, some of the projects that you're working on your website.
Yeah. And if you need anything from me for that, just let me know and I'll send it over to you.
Awesome, man. You're fantastic. Thanks, bro. I really appreciate it. It's good to catch up.
Always.
And when we get a chance when this is over, we definitely got to get together, whether it's up there in Atlanta or down here in South Florida.
Hey, that was actually my first time going to South Florida, so I'll be down to go back. Right, I love it so much. All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Right. Thanks, Ryan. Ciao. I'd like to thank Ryan for sharing his time, experience, and knowledge with us today. I always get so inspired when I listen to others and can see them living into their potential. And from where I stand, he's just scratching the surface. And it won't be long before his name and work become very mainstream. You can always listen again. And you can also find timestamp segments of the show, links to Ryan's social pages, and more information about his company, projects, and media in the show notes. If you enjoyed our conversation, please let us know. Continue the discussion with me across all social platforms and become a part of the Ultimate Gamer community today by subscribing to ultimategamer.com. We release 2 shows a week on Tuesday and Thursday, so be the first to join us for some outstanding upcoming guests and or dive back into the library of previous Level Up pods to hear some of the most brilliant minds in the space. Experts like head coach of the NBA 2K's Miami Heat check, Derek Famous Franklin, co-founder of Thunder Pixel Games, Dina McCowie, and COO of Torque Esports, Darcy Lawrence, just to name a few. You can find all these episodes and more on the Ultimate Gamer website, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And finally, please like, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach the gaming community to spread the word and share the wisdom of our guests, as well as some of the most thought-provoking stories in the industry. Shout out, as always, to the Ultimate Gamer. I look forward to being with you on the next Level Up podcast.